Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Soft Signal, where we're going to talk lead up to the England series that's going to happen in about 3-4 weeks from now. As always, I am Varun. I am joined by Aditya. Welcome to this week's show.
Yeah, welcome to episode 13.
Oh, it's episode 13?
Yes. We got quite a few episodes going here. It's getting interesting. It's getting more and more interesting each time.
Yeah.
And a big series coming up in a few weeks, like you said.
Yeah, we started this, I think, now nearly little more than 3 months ago. So we've been fairly regular and started primarily as an IPL thing at that time, and then we've just started talking about had different ideas throughout the course of these 3 months. Had to improvise a bit because of IPL being cancelled. Yeah, now we're looking forward to some more Test cricket with the Indian team still in England. Unfortunately, with the COVID restrictions and the bubble and all that, means they have to stay there since the end of June, and their match is only on the 4th of August with no warm-ups. So it is what it is. But I think we will cover the actual series in a couple of weeks. But for today's episode and for the next couple, we thought we would look back on some of the Indian tours to England. So India has been going to England for a long time, since even before India was an independent country in the 30s. Of course, we're old, we're not that old, so we weren't around at that time. And the earliest tour, I think, which we can both speak about with some level of memories and think is the 2002 one. I know there was a 96 one, and we had just started watching.
Yeah.
And there was the tour where Dravid and Ganguly made their debuts in that famous Lord's Test. But I don't think we can do it justice if we talked about that because we were really young. So we're going to start with the 2002 series, a momentous series for more reasons than one. But what are your initial memories of that tour?
Yeah, I mean that was a really good series. I think that was the first series where India actually started competing abroad. Uh, I think Ganguly was already the captain by then. John Wright was already the coach, and Dravid, Tendulkar, all these guys, Anil Kumble, they were all like almost at the peak of their powers, you could say, by then. And for the first time, there was a proper effort made by the coaching staff and the players themselves to try and win abroad.
Yeah.
And I think that series was the first series where you could see that you could actually see the results sort of coming together. Uh, Also, the other thing that stood out was the emergence of players like Sehwag, uh, Zahir Khan. Although I'm not sure if Zahir was there. He was there in the third Test match. I remember there. Ashish Nehra,
Yeah.
Sanjay Bangar as an opener. This is where they all sort of came into their own or started coming into their own, and then of course the ODI series, right, where you had the likes of Yuvraj, Mohammad Kaif, all these guys coming to the fore and making a name for themselves, and of course who can forget the iconic view of Saurav Ganguly shirtless, waving his shirt around in the Lord's balcony, where traditionally, at the bottom you would have prim and proper English spectators in their suits, reading their newspapers and clapping softly if the ball went for a boundary or a six. So it was quite iconic, that moment. But I think within all those moments, the fact that India had finally started competing overseas is the thing that stood out the most to me.
Yeah, it was a very exciting time for Indian cricket, I think, because we were like around 12, 13 years old. And for the first 4 or 5 years that we had watched Indian cricket, you're right, we were not a great team at all. We were like that whole 2000 match fixing saga and all of that. After that is when we started getting, with Ganguly becoming the captain, some level of competition. Like we were able to compete. Like going abroad with the goal was to not lose, or even to lose but not get whitewashed. Maybe lose 1-0 or 2. That would be a successful tour.
Yeah,
And after the 2001 series against Australia at home, that was like a turning point for Indian cricket for sure. But we hadn't built on that yet. We had even lost a test away to Zimbabwe. We had lost
yeah,
South Africa. We had gone to West Indies where were 1-0 up in the series, and then we had lost that series again. So there was a lot of ifs and like nearly theirs that this was a team coming together. And but this series, as we saw, we didn't win again, but we won a test and we came from behind, which was not something that Indian teams of the past had done. And just like I'm biased, but that was actually one of probably my favorite Indian team to watch as well. Like there was a sense of optimism which you hadn't seen before.
yeah. No, I totally agree. It was the start of something special. And and the thing is that uh, not only did they have just the skill, but they also developed the temperament.
Yeah,
I think you put it very aptly. Like in the past, Indian teams would go abroad, and it was given that they would lose. It's just that they had to be careful of the margin by which they lost. I mean, a
yeah,
draw abroad was like a victory. uh, you could just see the shoulders of the Indian players whenever they traveled abroad. Their shoulders were always drooping. They seemed that they had already accepted defeat way before the match had even started, right? So it was quite depressing. I mean, you spoke about that series in 1996, right? I think it was just one test match in that series in 96, the one before where Ganguly and Dravid made a century. I think that series was just one test match, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure.
mm,
And even in that series, there is a clip of Javagal Srinath getting Graham Hick out, and even after getting him out, Graham Hick is sledging him. Like he said something to him and approached him in a bullish manner, and Srinath is kind of ducking away. There is a
yeah,
clip like so. So that's my point. I mean, Indian players and just the very psyche of Indian cricketers and maybe the psyche of the nation at that time was that we go abroad, we just save our faces, we don't get hammered, and then we come back. But in 2002, all that changed. I think I think that is really something that stood out, and it was like the perfect combination of skill and temperament coming together to ensure that like Indian teams, like that Indian team and Indian teams thereafter, would not just get bullied overseas and come back with their tail between their legs, as they say.
yeah. Like what you said is right. That was a different psyche. Like Ganguly's moment, it's a funny moment. We laugh at it, but it was a very iconic moment because it showed that I don't care where I am. I might be in Lord's, home of cricket, like you said, these very formally dressed Englishmen sitting there, and but this is like they just expressed. It was a way of expressing himself. Like we would previously go to England or somewhere and say that okay, we'll not embarrass ourselves. What would people think of us if we do this or do that? But this was just a moment of just free expression, which we hadn't seen before.
Yeah, and it was actually in response to what Flintoff did, right?
Yeah,
So just a couple of months ago, England came to India for a series, and it was in the ODI series. England actually beat us in the ODI series. They came back from 2-0 from 2-0 down in a five-match series, and they beat us. And in the last match of the series at the Wankhede, they managed to defend the target, and Andrew Flintoff stood in the middle of the pitch and removed his shirt and started waving it around. Okay, now the thing is that in the past, just the psyche, right, of the nation those days was to say, okay, if somebody from abroad can do this, it's so great,
yeah,
but we'll not go back abroad and do it, right? It was just considered as if it was we cannot do that in their home. It's not correct. But if they can do it with us, why can't we do it? Why can't we do it to them? And this is something that changed. in the era of Ganguly's captaincy. And so the man himself was not scared or worried about what the prim and proper British spectator would think about. He said that it was simple. If Andrew Flintoff could do it in the middle of Bombay, in the middle of the Wankhede, then why can't
Yeah,
Saurav Ganguly do the same thing in the middle of Lords? And to think of it, there is no
it's right.
reason why
Yeah.
not. So,
And Flintoff has a bad history of riling up Indians. It doesn't turn off out well for him because of
yes,
the 2007 T20 World Cup also.
yeah,
Very
yeah,
but yeah, so going that ODI series, because I think the ODI series was played first, the NatWest Triangle, it was
yeah.
India, England, and Sri Lanka. We played well in that series. We made the final against England. But that had happened so many times before. So we were also a team. I think we had lost 11 finals in a row or something like that in these kind of tournaments, either the final ODI of a series or of a triangular. So we'd reached the final, but we never seemed to be able to cross the line. And just to set some context about the final, this was 2002. England had batted first and scored 325, and 325 in 2002 was like 450 today.
Yeah.
And for us to, if we had a chance, we could have batted first and maybe try to defend. But for us to imagine chasing in a final, 325 was just unbelievable. It's not something we could have expected to win at all. Like, so that's just some context. That win that we had was a, even if the match was played today, it would have been a great match and it would have been a great win for us. But with all that going into the match, it was just one of the greatest wins for Indian cricket in ODI cricket.
Yeah, it was huge. You're absolutely right about the context. And in fact, I'd just like to build a little bit more on the context. Before 2002, in the late 90s, let's say let's take the example of the late 90s, whenever India had to chase anything above 270 or 280 outside of India, it was as if when it was very simple. The template was very simple, right? Sachin would go in, he'd try his best, he'd get you some quick runs, get you a good start maybe, and then if he would get out, the rest of the batsmen would just play
Yeah,
out the remaining overs. So
it was depressing.
it
You
was
will have
depressing.
Nikhil
Yeah?
Chopra and Sunil Joshi batting, scoring 20
Exactly.
of 60. Yeah,
Exactly. It's like they would just bat out the 50 overs
yeah,
without any intention of actually trying to chase the target down. Then in 2002, this changed, right? For the first time outside India, you had you had the middle order actually trying to continue the chase.
yeah,
And I've watched that NatWest series final. I watched it live. I've watched highlights, and I've
yeah,
watched some more highlights. And I remember that there is a clip. There is a part when Harsha Bhogle is on commentary, and he actually says this. He says that Yuvraj and KF could have simply just played out the overs, improved their batting averages, and that's it. Moved on to the next tournament. Now that kind of epitomizes also for me the psyche of the entire Indian cricket system at this stage, right?
yeah,
Harsha Bhogle has been commentating for a long time. He would have seen what Indian cricket was all about in the late 90s. And that's where his comment was coming from, because this is what used to happen. But it was so refreshing to see batsmen coming in at number 6 and 7, continuing the chase and not just giving it up with the score at 140 for 5. So this was super iconic even for me. I mean, you finally felt that there is this wave of confidence sweeping across the Indian team, and really a lot of that is down to the captaincy of Ganguly.
yeah. And young guys, right? Like Yuvraj was 20 and KF was 21. Like we were a bit younger than that at the time, but just for us as kids also to look up to these younger guys who we can kind of relate to was just great to watch. Um,
Absolutely.
and so just talking about that final, I mean, 326, like you said, because Sachin would normally come out. In this case, it was Ganguly and Sehwag who got 100 and I think 11 or 12 overs, which was kind of unheard of as well. But then we had the familiar collapse where Ganguly, Sehwag, Dravid Dinesh Mongia, who was batting
Yeah.
who was in the team for a couple of years for some reason, and then of course Sachin getting bowled. I mean, like you said, right? You watched that final. I've watched it so many times. I've watched it with Indian commentary, with English commentary,
Yeah.
and it's just that Ashley Giles trying to cut it and getting bowled. And yeah, we still needed 180 runs and I think the asking rate was close to 6 or just above 6. It was not easy, and this is 2002, 5 years before T20 even came about. So, and if you have watched a couple of Mohammad Kaif interviews, where he's obviously talked about that match, and he said his own family left the house and went to watch a movie because they didn't even they thought Sachin is out, their own son will not be able to do it.
Yeah.
Like that is the, but I don't blame them in a way because that's what it was like, right?
It was like that. It was like once Sachin gets out, everybody switches off their TVs because they knew, right? People knew that the rest of the batting lineup is simply not going to try to chase the target down. So
Yeah,
really, it was so refreshing to see these guys at number 6 and 7 carrying the chase forward and then taking us across the line as well. It's iconic. I mean, that series is iconic for so many reasons.
yeah. And the last recognized pair also, because after that we had Harbhajan Kumble,
Yeah,
Zahir Khan, and Ashish Nehra, of course.
Nashi.
But like Yuvraj got out, and then we still needed about 60, 70 runs to win. And then Harbhajan came in, and that match he actually played pretty well. He got a few boundaries. Kev kept just going. I think it was just the adrenaline. And then those last 2 overs where we thought still, okay, now they lost 2 more wickets. It was Zahir and Kev at the end. It, and then that last over, 2 of 6, even at that point, we thought we might lose.
Exactly. And guess who the bowler was?
It was
It
it
was
was
it was
Flintoff.
Flintoff.
Yes, exactly. So maybe he would have taken his shirt off again if he had won
Exactly. Yeah.
they won the match for them. And yeah,
Exactly.
just that overthrow, and because they have heard this from watching the match also, that over, if that ball had hit, he would have probably been out, and then they would have been the last wicket with still two to get. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many scenarios, right? But
Yeah.
just that victory was, and that victory helped because we didn't really perform that well through the rest of the year in ODIs, but then it helped us for that 2003 World Cup. And then since then, I think we've been a side. It's just changed the mindset. We know we can chase, and we can beat big team. Like England was not the best team then, but yeah, we can beat teams away.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I think that was iconic.
Yeah,
And then even the test series was quite interesting as well. I
yeah.
mean, the one match that we won, I think, was the match in which Dravid, Sachin, and
And
Ganguly. I think Ganguly got 99.
no, he
Right?
got, that was the previous one. That match which you're talking about, he
Yeah.
got 100 also.
Okay. Yeah. So you had three of them get big hundreds.
Yeah,
I think, but you know that was fine. That happened many a times. But I think in the test series, what really stood out for me was the emergence of Sehwag as an opener.
yeah,
I think we happened to stumble upon a gem. Honestly, Sehwag at number 6, which is where he was batting before that, was good, but he would have been like any other number 6,
yeah,
right? He would probably have got a few hundreds because he would score fast, but that's it. But the fact that India found him and made him an opener changed the way we approach Test cricket as well. I mean, for the first time, you had someone in Test cricket go at a strike rate of 80. It was amazing. I
yeah,
mean, bowlers literally were worried about trying to you know trying to save the runs instead of taking wickets, which is technically what you do with what you try to do with the new ball. Bowlers try to take wickets, but Sehwag, with his own belief of he says that for him the best way to reduce the shine on the ball was to hit it harder. Right? So it's just the mindset. It was amazing,
yeah,
and I think India discovered a real gem of an opener back then through Sehwag. And think of it, before Sehwag, there was no opener like this in Test cricket, And after Sehwag, also, there has not really been an opener like this. And I'm not just talking about for India, but for the rest of the world. I mean, you had guys like Matthew Hayden, who would probably be the closest to a Sehwag style opener. But apart from that, there's nobody else.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Like, I think even Jayasurya, he did it in ODIs, but in Tests he was not that prolific. Sehwag was once in a generation player for sure. Um, that first Test we lost, which was as expected in a way. Like it was after the high of the ODI win, we just came crashing down. But it was not all lost because Ajit Agarkar got a century at Lords, which he still talks about, and right, like something that Sachin, Ponting, and I think a few others have not got. Ajit Agarkar has his name
Yeah.
on the honors board. But that second test, right, we drew it, and we were in a position where we would have normally lost that kind of
Yeah.
match because it was the last day we were trying to save it. And Parthiv Patel, in his debut at 17 years old, I don't know how they picked him. Like
Exactly.
from where he was picked at the time, but yeah, he hung out in the stuck it out on the last day, and that I think inspired the team for that third test as well because that we could have been 2-0 down and it would have been yeah we'd have
Over.
probably lost then 4-0.
Exactly. Yeah, I think Parthiv, I don't think Parthiv Patel even had a great first class record or anything at that stage.
Yeah,
He was only 17. So it was amazing. Whoever picked him made the right choice, at least that time. Things didn't pan out that well after that, but at least for that point in time, he showed some real guts for
yeah,
a debutant to bat in the fading light. If I remember well, it was not easy conditions. It was overcast British English conditions, the ball swinging around and all of that stuff. But he stuck it out and kept India alive in that series actually. So it was really really interesting, really good to see some new young talent come through. And then of course, you like you said, the third test match which we won, a lot of the inspiration for that win probably came from the fact that we managed to save the second test match by such a close margin.
yeah. That was the perfect test match. That third test, we won by an innings
Yeah,
away at Headingley, and that first day, I know you talk about Sachin, Ganguly, and Dravid 100, but that first day, Sanjay Bangar was actually the hero because he and Dravid, of course, but he and Dravid got almost 200 runs for the second wicket
yeah,
on that tough first day, which set it up beautifully and totally unexpected. So it was a series where, like you alluded to earlier, where these guys just put in unexpected performances one after the other, and we found our heroes in different places.
yeah. Sanjay Wangar, I think I still remember he scored 68 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think so.
but that 68 was worth a lot more because he did what Sehwag did as well, but in a different way, right? He hung it out. He showed some guts. He didn't throw his wicket away. And again, he was not really an opener.
Yeah,
It was not his primary role in the team. He was not supposed to be an opener. But again, this is the kind of stuff which would never have happened in the 90s, right? That you stuck somebody up in an unfamiliar batting position and they would literally and in the 90s they would just succumb to the pressure. I mean, there
yeah,
was no chance. You just knew that would happen. It was inevitable. But it did happen in 2002 because of the mentality and temperament of each one of those players on that tour. Sanjay Bangar being one of them, and of course he did what all good openers do: softened the new ball, took on the pressure, absorbed the pressure, and then that paved the way for numbers 3, 4, and 5 to score big and put India in a very commanding position.
yeah. And there was just that period towards the end of the second day where Sachin and Ganguly were batting,
Yeah.
and it was bad light, but they continued batting, and they like it was like a one-day match. They were just smashing it to all parts. It was just
It was
amazing.
like the cliched phrase poetry in motion.
Yeah,
Like two batsmen at the height of their powers just toying with the English bowling in English conditions.
yeah,
It was great to watch. It was really great to watch. It was total domination by an Indian team against England in England. And
Yeah.
I think the fact that it was in England is what really stood out at that stage.
And then going on to the last test where we've seen this, right? Where India wins a test and then they just capitulate right after. But it was a draw, and England scored like 500 plus in their first innings. But then we responded with the same score, like we were like 6 or 7 runs short. We'd almost got to their innings, and we mentioned it sporadically, but Rahul Dravid, that tour as well for him. He was a good batsman. He was one of the mainstays of Indian batting, but that elevated him to a new status. Like he scored centuries in the second, third, and fourth match, double century in the fourth match. So like yeah, that was his summer was for sure.
I think this was that phase where he got 5 consecutive centuries in 5 test
Yeah,
matches or something like this, right? He was on the verge of a record. I think he scored 4 centuries there, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just guessing here. He scored 4 centuries there, and then a
he came
century
home
again
to
in India,
in West Indies, yeah, against West
West
Indies.
Indies. Right,
No,
right.
in
It was a
India against West.
continuation from West Indies, right?
Sorry,
It was a no, no. He
no, it
it
was
was,
the at Wankhede. It was a test against West Indies.
and this
That
was after, yeah, this was
after the
after
Indian series. Yeah,
the India England series. Yeah, so he was in this purple patch at that stage,
yeah,
and it was amazing. Like you're right, this really elevated him to the next level in terms of Indian batting greats. Not that he was, not that he wasn't great before that already, but this was just like, him entering Sachin level
yeah.
greatness.
And then
So
he continued that period for 4 or 5 years. Like he was consistently like he had so many performances, Adelaide, Rawalpindi, and the like. But we'll get to. I can spend an hour talking about Dravid, so we won't do that. And he also kept. This is actually something we should have. We didn't talk about in the ODI, but just him keeping allowed us to play KF at 7, and which won us that Natwest series. Again, something radical. I don't think I'm we had ever experimented like that before. We always wanted one keeper, Dayan Mungia, through the 90s who could not, like our batting would end at 5 or 6. But yeah, that was another bold move that we hadn't seen before.
yeah, it was a bold move, and it, as you said, it allowed us to play a seventh genuine batsman.
Yeah,
And I think for a brief period before the arrival of Dhoni, Rahul Dravid had broken all records of Indian wicketkeepers.
yeah,
Right? So he was like the wicketkeeper with most runs, obviously, because he had already a lot of runs by then. But he also had quite a few catches. He had stumpings. Uh, and he really was India's best wicketkeeper at that stage, like wicketkeeper batsman. It was unbelievable. We could not produce a high quality all rounder, and we could not produce a high quality wicketkeeper batsman.
yeah,
So Rahul Dravid was the first high quality wicketkeeper batsman that India produced. You think of it.
yeah.
So it was a bold move and one that really paid off.
Yeah, I want to correct your statement. We could not produce an all-rounder, and we have not been able to produce an all-rounder since
Yeah,
then as well.
true.
So that is a we've sorted out the keeping, but
Yes,
we're still lacking in the all-rounder department.
you're still waiting for that top quality all rounder. Yeah.
Okay, so what was if you had to choose one favorite memory from that tour, just one that stands out of so many, what would yours be?
Uh, that's a very good question. I think I think my favorite memory would be uh, Zahir Khan in that NatWest series final. So Zahir Khan deflecting the ball onto the onside. They run across for a single. The ball gets thrown in from the deep. And then it goes for overthrows. And then of course Ravi Shastri
Yeah,
in
Zahir
commentary,
scampers for the second.
and he scampers for the second. India have won. I think that, and then of course you've got Zahir getting excited at one end, Kef excited at the other end, and then You have all the Indian players rush onto the field, and then the camera pans towards the Lord's balcony, and you've got an Indian captain waving his shirt in the air. I think that whole sequence of events is probably the one that stands out for me.
Yeah, that I agree. And that was a turning point because that exact situation could have played out in the 90s where the ball would have hit and then the next ball, the number 11 would have come in and got bowled in the first ball, first ball and we would have lost by 1 run. So
Yes. Yeah.
that ball missing was just luck and that just signified a changing of fortunes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
And
true.
my that's obviously an iconic memory, but my
Yeah.
favorite memory is that second day of the third test towards the end, which I referred to, where they were just. It seemed like the English bowlers were helpless. It seemed like Ganguly and Tendulkar were playing a practice match or against a under 19 team or something. The way they would, and they were offered the light multiple times. They said no, and just they got I think 120 runs in 20 overs or something like that, and it was so something which we had not seen, utter domination with a helpless bowling against a helpless bowling attack. So that was like something that was a very fond memory for me watching.
Yeah, it's a good point you make. I think the fact that they were offered the light so
Yeah,
many times and they didn't take it, that is what makes it even more special. I
yeah,
mean, how many times have you seen batsmen being offered the light and them not taking it? It really doesn't happen. So the fact that they did that and then went on to dominate the bowlers in not ideal conditions is just amazing. You're right.
yeah. Um, I think that wraps up what we've. I think this is the episode we smiled the most, maybe, because it's just such a fun time in life and memory to look back upon. So that's it for this week's episode. For next week, we're going to talk about 2007, where it was actually even better because we won the series. But we'll talk about that in the later, in the next episode. But I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this one. We had a lot of fun talking about it, and we'll see you soon for the next one.
Yeah, see you soon and stay safe.